Commander Vrakthar had seen many things in his 300 cycles of service. He had watched stars collapse. He had negotiated with hive minds that spoke in mathematical equations. He had even survived a dinner party with the diplomatic corps of Centauri Prime, which, trust me, was far more dangerous than it sounds. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the human janitor. The day started normally enough, which should have been his first warning. Normal days in the Galactic peacekeeping station never stayed normal for long. Vrakthar was reviewing security footage in his office, his 4 eyes tracking multiple screens simultaneously, a talent that had taken him 60 cycles to master and made him absolutely insufferable at poker nights. Sir, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mora, entered without knocking. Her scales were flushed a nervous purple, which meant either she had bad news or she had accidentally eaten contraband again. "We have a situation in Training Bay 7. Define situation," Vrakthar said, not looking up from his screens. "The human is mopping." Vrakthar's eyes, all 4 of them, snapped to Mora. "And this is a problem because he is mopping during the Kaldrith Guard's advanced combat training." Now that got his attention. The Kaldrith Guard were not your average security personnel. Oh no. These were beings bred from birth, genetically optimized for combat, trained in 17 different martial disciplines before they could even speak their first words. They ate rocks for breakfast, actual rocks. Their homeworld had gravity 3 times that of standard. Their reflexes were faster than most species could perceive, and they could bench press a small spacecraft. They were, in short, the kind of beings you did not want to annoy, and someone was mopping during their training session. "Please tell me it is not Eddie," Vrakthar said, already knowing the answer. Mora's scales went from purple to a sort of resigned gray. "It is Eddie." "Of course it is," Vrakthar muttered, standing up from his desk. His joints creaked, which was embarrassing for someone who prided himself on staying in peak physical condition. "Of course it is Eddie. Why would it be anyone else? Why would the universe grant me one single day without that particular human doing something that defies all logic and reason?" Eddie Martinez had been working at the Galactic peacekeeping station for exactly 47 standard days. In that time he had somehow managed to become both the most beloved and most bewildering member of the entire facility. He was a janitor, hired through some bureaucratic mix-up that Vrakthar still had not fully untangled, and he approached his job with a level of cheerful determination that bordered on the psychotic. The human was always smiling, always humming strange tunes, always appearing in places he should not be. At times that made no logical sense, carrying his mop and bucket like they were sacred artifacts, and he was absolutely, positively, completely unkillable. Not in the literal sense, mind you. Eddie was just as squishy and fragile as any other human. But the universe seemed to have decided that this particular janitor was its favorite comedy routine, and it was going to protect him with all the dedication of a mother Graxian defending her nest. Vrakthar and Mora arrived at Training Bay 7 to find exactly the scene he had dreaded. 12 Kaldrith guards, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, covered in ceremonial battle armor that could withstand plasma fire, were arranged in a combat formation. Their instructor, a grizzled veteran named Cross, was barking orders in their native tongue which sounded like rocks being thrown into a garbage disposal. And there, right in the middle of their training circle, was Eddie Martinez. Mop, the human, was wearing his usual outfit, blue coveralls that had seen better days, a name tag that was slightly crooked, those ridiculous rubber shoes that squeaked on the metal floors. His hair was a mess. His face had a smudge of something that might have been grease, or might have been chocolate, and he was humming what Vrakthar had learned was called classic rock from Earth's ancient musical period. "Eddie," Vrakthar called out, his voice carrying across the training bay with the authority of someone who had commanded fleets. "What are you doing?" Eddie looked up, his face breaking into that impossibly wide human smile. "Oh hey, Commander V. Just finishing up in here. Someone spilled protein gel all over the floor after the last session. Real mess. Could have been a safety hazard, you know." "The Kaldrith Guard are training," Vrakthar said slowly, as if explaining to a very small child. "Active combat drills, with live weapons." "Yeah, I noticed," Eddie said cheerfully, wringing out his mop. "They have got some pretty sweet moves. Hey Cross, that spinning thing you guys do? That is wild, man. Very impressive." Instructor Cross, who had fought in the border wars and once held off an entire pirate fleet single-handedly, looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. His skin, normally a healthy gray, had turned a dangerous shade of crimson. "The human," Cross growled, each word dripping with barely contained rage, "will not leave. I am almost done, Eddie said, completely missing the homicidal undertones. Just got this one corner and I will be out of your way. 5 minutes tops. We asked him to leave, Mora whispered to Vrykthar, politely, then firmly. Then we tried to physically escort him out, and he said he was on a schedule. Vrykthar felt a headache forming behind his primary eyes. Eddie, you cannot mop during combat training. It is against at least 15 different safety regulations. Really? Eddie paused, looking genuinely surprised. Nobody told me that. But hey, I am almost finished anyway, so no harm, no foul, right? One of the Kaldrith guards, a young warrior named Throk, stepped forward. He was new to the station, still eager to prove himself, still convinced that his training made him invincible. Vrykthar recognized the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who was about to make a terrible mistake. The human mocks us, Throk announced, his voice booming across the bay. He shows disrespect to the Kaldrith guard. This cannot stand. Oh no, man, Eddie said, raising his hands in what he probably thought was a peaceful gesture. I am not mocking anybody. I think you guys are awesome. Seriously. The training you all do. That is dedication. I respect that. You respect nothing, Throk snarled. You are weak, soft. A creature of no consequence who cleans waste and thinks himself clever. Eddie blinked. I mean, I do not really think I am clever. I am just trying to do my job, you know. Throk, Cross said, a warning in his tone. But the young warrior was not listening. He was staring at Eddie with all the intensity of someone who had spent their entire life being told they were the apex predator and had just been challenged by a hamster. I challenge you, Throk declared. Single combat. Here. Now. If you are so confident, human, prove your worth. The training bay went silent. Even Eddie stopped humming. Vrykthar closed all 4 of his eyes. Please do not. That is really not necessary, Eddie said, scratching the back of his head. Look, buddy. I am just here to clean. I do not want any trouble. You refuse? Throk's voice rose. You are a coward as well as an insult. I am not a coward, Eddie said, and for the first time, there was something in his voice that was not cheerful. It was not angry either. Just tired. Like he had been through this exact conversation too many times before. I just do not see the point in fighting someone over mopping a floor. Then you admit weakness, Eddie sighed. A long, drawn-out sound that somehow conveyed more exhaustion than Vrykthar had felt in his entire career. All right, fine, you know what? Sure. Let us do this. But just so we are clear, I am not trained for any of this fancy combat stuff you guys do. I am probably going to look like an idiot. You already look like an idiot, Throk shot back. Fair point, Eddie conceded. Vrykthar wanted to intervene. He should have intervened, but something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the small, vindictive part of him that wanted to see the overconfident Throk taken down a peg. Maybe it was just the knowledge that trying to stop Eddie from doing anything once he had made up his mind was like trying to stop a supernova with a stern talking to. The other Kaldrith guards formed a circle. This was tradition. When honor was challenged, combat was witnessed. Cross looked like he wanted to object, but said nothing. Even he was curious now. Eddie set his mop aside carefully, like it was a precious relic. He cracked his knuckles, which made an unpleasant popping sound that caused several guards to wince. So how does this work, Eddie asked. First to tap out? First blood? Death match? First to yield, Cross said quickly, before Throk could suggest anything more permanent. Cool, Eddie nodded. That works. Do we bow or shake hands or anything? Throk did not answer. He simply lunged. The Kaldrith guard moved like lightning, faster than most beings could track. His combat training was perfect. His form was flawless. His strike was aimed with precision that came from 10,000 hours of practice. Eddie stepped to the side, not gracefully, not with any particular skill. He just sort of shuffled awkwardly to the left, and Throk's fist sailed past his head by approximately 2 inches. The young warrior spun, throwing a kick that could have shattered reinforced steel. Eddie ducked under it, stumbling slightly, windmilling his arms for balance. Whoa, Eddie said. That was close. Throk snarled and pressed his attack. Punch, kick, elbow, knee. A combination that would have overwhelmed a dozen opponents. Eddie dodged them all with movements that looked less like combat training, and more like someone trying to avoid stepping in puddles. The Kaldrith guards watching began to murmur among themselves. This was not possible. Throk was one of their best. How was the human? This clumsy, awkward human, avoiding every strike. Brakthar knew. He had seen it before. Eddie did not move like a fighter. He moved like someone who had spent years in crowded spaces, in tight quarters, navigating around obstacles while carrying cleaning supplies. Every movement was economical, efficient, born from muscle memory, developed through thousands of hours of janitorial work. It was absurd. It should not work. But it did. Thruk, growing frustrated, abandoned technique for raw aggression. He grabbed for Eddie, trying to use his superior strength and size to simply overwhelm the human. Eddie grabbed Thruk's wrist. For a moment, nothing happened. The Kaldrith warrior froze, confused. Humans were weak. Their grip strength was pathetic. How was Eddie holding him? Then Eddie twisted. It was not a combat technique. It was the exact motion someone would use to wring out a mop. Eddie had wrung out mops thousands of times. Tens of thousands. His hands knew that motion better than Thruk knew his own name. The Kaldrith guard flipped. He actually flipped through the air, his own momentum and confusion working against him, and landed flat on his back with a sound like a gong being struck. The training bay erupted in shocked silence. Eddie looked down at Thruk, genuine concern on his face. "Oh, man. Are you okay? That looked like it hurt. Do you need ice or something?" Thruk stared up at the ceiling, his expression one of complete and utter bewilderment. In his entire life, through all his training, through countless sparring matches and real combat situations, he had never, not once, been defeated so easily by a janitor with a mop-wringing technique. "I yield," Thruk whispered. Eddie helped him up, which somehow made it worse. "Hey, good match, man. You were really fast." "I got lucky." "Luck," Cross said slowly, "does not flip a Kaldrith guard." "Well, I mean, he kind of did most of the work," Eddie said modestly. "I just sort of redirected his energy." "That is a thing, right?" "I think I saw it in a movie once." Before anyone could respond, another guard stepped forward. Then another. Then another. They wanted to test themselves against this impossible human. This creature who should not be able to defeat even one of them, let alone multiple. It became a challenge, a puzzle to solve. Eddie tried to decline. He really did. But the Kaldrith culture was one of warriors, and they would not be denied. So Eddie fought 12 Kaldrith guards in a row, and he won every single match, not through skill, not through strength, but through a combination of janitorial muscle memory, dumb luck, and what Brakthar was becoming increasingly convinced was the universe's warped sense of humor. Eddie disarmed one guard using a technique he called the squeegee sweep. He tripped another with footwork developed from years of backing out of rooms while mopping. He somehow turned a headlock into an accidental submission hold that he apologized for 3 times while applying. By the time the 12th guard yielded, every being in the training bay was staring at Eddie like he had just sprouted wings and declared himself the god of small kitchen appliances. Eddie, for his part, was breathing hard and sweating. "Okay," he panted. "Okay, that was a workout. Wow. You guys are really something. I am going to feel this tomorrow." He picked up his mop and bucket. "Sorry about the interruption. I will just finish this corner and get out of your way." And he went back to mopping, just like that. Like nothing strange had happened. Like he had not just defeated 12 of the most elite warriors in the galaxy using cleaning techniques. Brakthar looked at Mora. Mora looked at Cross. Cross looked at his guards. Nobody said anything. What was there to say? Eddie finished his corner, humming that same Earth song, and headed for the exit. He paused at the door, turning back with that ridiculous smile. "Hey, same time tomorrow? I have got to clean the observation deck at 1400 hours, but after that I am free if you guys want to hang out or something. Maybe grab lunch? I hear the cantina is doing something with Regellian protein pods that is supposed to be really good." He left before anyone could answer. The training bay remained silent for a full minute. Then Thruk, still looking dazed, spoke. "What just happened?" "I have no idea," Cross admitted. Brakthar sighed. It was going to be a very long assignment. The news spread through the Galactic peacekeeping station like wildfire, which, given that the station had actual fire suppression systems designed to handle plasma-based lifeforms, was saying something. Eddie Martinez, human janitor, had defeated 12 Kaldrith guards in single combat. By the time Brekton made it back to his office, his communication console was already flooded with messages. The station administrator wanted a full report. The Kaldrith embassy was demanding an explanation. 3 different news outlets were requesting interviews, and somehow, inexplicably, the betting pools that ran through the lower decks had already paid out. 17,000 credits to someone who had apparently wagered on this exact scenario. Verkathar was going to find out who that was. He had questions. This is a disaster, Mora said, pacing back and forth across his office. Her scales had gone through 6 different colors in the last 10 minutes, which Verkathar was pretty sure was a medical concern. The Kaldrith are a proud warrior culture. They base their entire society on combat prowess and martial tradition. One of their elite guards was just defeated by a man whose primary weapon is a wet mop. 12 of their elite guards, Verkathar corrected. Mora's scales turned a color that did not exist in nature. That does not help, sir. I am aware. The door to his office burst open, which was becoming a disturbing trend. Security Chief Raxton stormed in, all 6 of his arms gesticulating wildly. The Hexarian was usually calm, collected, professional. Right now he looked like someone who had just witnessed the fundamental laws of physics take a coffee break. Commander Raxton said, his voice tight. We need to talk about the human. Get in line, Verkathar muttered. I just reviewed the security footage from Training Bay 7. All of it. Multiple angles. Slow motion. Frame-by-frame analysis. And it makes no sense. Raxton threw his hands up, which, with 6 arms, was quite the spectacle. The human has no combat training. None. I ran his file through every martial arts database in the galaxy. Nothing. He took a self-defense class in college 17 years ago and failed because he kept apologizing to his sparring partner. So how did he win? Mora asked. That is the thing, Raxton said, pulling up a holographic display. The footage showed Eddie dodging one of Thruck's punches. He should not have won. Look at this. The guard strike was perfectly executed. Textbook form. It should have connected, but the human moved exactly 0.73 seconds before the punch was thrown. Verkathar leaned forward. Precognition? Humans do not have precognitive abilities, Raxton said. I checked, twice. They are completely baseline. No psychic potential whatsoever. Some of them claim to have intuition, but that is just pattern recognition and subconscious processing. Then explain the footage. I cannot. Raxton looked like he wanted to throw his datapad across the room. And it gets worse. Look at this moment here. The hologram shifted to show Eddie flipping Throck. The human's grip strength is measured at standard human levels. Decent, but nothing special. The guard weighs 240 kilograms in full armor. The amount of force required to flip him should have torn the human's muscles clean off his bones, but it did not. Verkathar observed, but it did not. Raxton confirmed. Because somehow, impossibly, the human used the guard's own momentum against him with perfect efficiency. 0 wasted movement. 0 wasted energy. The kind of technique that takes master martial artists decades to learn, except Eddie Martinez learned it by mopping floors. The 3 of them stood in silence, staring at the frozen hologram of Eddie looking confused and apologetic. I do not like this, Mora said finally. Humans are not supposed to be dangerous. They are Category 4, moderate technological development. No significant physical advantages. Mild pack bonding tendencies. They are supposed to be harmless. Someone should tell Eddie that, Verkathar said. His console beeped. Verkathar glanced at the message and immediately wished he had called in sick today. The Kaldrith Honor Council is requesting a formal meeting. They want to discuss Eddie's status. His status. Mora's scales flickered nervously. What does that mean? It means, Verkona said slowly, that the Kaldrith have decided Eddie is interesting. And when warrior cultures decide something is interesting, things tend to explode. 3 hours later, Verkathar found himself in Conference Room Alpha with 12 very serious-looking Kaldrith officials, Instructor Cross, and Eddie, who had been summoned mid-shift, and still had his cleaning cart with him. I am sorry, Eddie was saying, but I really do not understand what this is about. Am I in trouble? Because I tried to leave the training bay. I really did. But then there was the challenge, and I did not want to be rude. And things just kind of escalated. The head of the Kaldrith delegation, an ancient warrior named Graxmar who had more scars than skin, studied Eddie with an intensity that would have made most beings faint. You defeated 12 of our guards. I mean, sort of. Eddie shifted uncomfortably. It was more like they kind of defeated themselves and I just happened to be there. Humility, Graxmar said. Unusual in a warrior of your caliber. I am not a warrior, Eddie protested. I am a janitor. I clean things. Floors, mostly. Sometimes windows. There was this one time I had to clean the waste recycling system and that was a whole thing, but mostly floors. You fight like you clean? One of the council members asked. I do not fight at all if I can help it, Eddie said. Fighting is messy. Creates a lot of cleanup work afterward. Blood is really hard to get out of tile grout, you know. Graxmar leaned forward. Eddie Martinez of Earth. The Keldrith Honor Council has reached a decision. We wish to offer you a position. Graxar's blood went cold. Oh no. Oh no. A position? Eddie asked. Like a job? I already have a job. I am the janitor. It is right there on my name tag and everything. We wish to offer you the position of combat instructor for the Keldrith Guard. The room went silent. Eddie blinked. I am sorry, what? You have demonstrated abilities beyond our understanding, Graxmar continued. You have defeated our warriors with techniques we cannot comprehend. This is valuable. We wish to learn from you. Learn from me. Eddie's voice went up an octave. Learn what? How to mop. I can teach you that, sure. But I do not think it is going to help much in combat. On the contrary, Cross spoke up. I have analyzed your movements. You have developed a fighting style based entirely on efficiency and economy of motion. No wasted energy. No unnecessary flourishes. Pure function. It is brilliant. It is mopping, Eddie said desperately. It is more than mopping, Graxmar said. It is a philosophy. A way of moving through the world. We wish to incorporate this into our training. Eddie looked at Vrkothar pleadingly. Commander, a little help here, Vrkothar sighed. He had been in command long enough to recognize a losing battle. Eddie, the Keldrith are offering you a great honor. Combat instructor is a position of immense prestige in their culture, but I do not know anything about combat. You defeated 12 guards, Graxmar pointed out. That was an accident. There are no accidents in combat, Cross said firmly. Only opportunities seized or lost. Eddie ran his hands through his hair, which made it stick up at odd angles. Look, this is all very flattering, really. But I cannot be a combat instructor. I have responsibilities. Floors do not clean themselves, well, except for the ones in the automated sector, but those have their own cleaning bots and, honestly, they do a terrible job. Always miss the corners. You would retain your position as janitor, Graxmar said. This would be additional duty. 2 hours each day. You would teach our guards your techniques. My techniques are mopping. Exactly. Eddie looked around the room, searching for support. Nobody met his eyes. Even Vrkothar had to admit there was a certain logic to it. If the Keldrith wanted to learn from Eddie, refusing would be a diplomatic incident, and diplomatic incidents tended to involve weapons fire and property damage, which meant more work for Eddie anyway. Can I think about it? Eddie asked weakly. No, Graxmar said. We require an answer now. The honor of the Keldrith Guard demands it. Eddie slumped in his chair. Fine. Okay. Sure. I will teach your guards how to fight like a janitor. This is my life now, apparently. The Keldrith erupted in what Vrkothar had learned to recognize as their version of applause, which sounded like rocks being thrown into a cement mixer. Graxmar stood, clasping Eddie's hand in a grip that looked painful. You honor us, Instructor Martinez. Just Eddie is fine, Eddie said, wincing. And you are welcome, I guess. The meeting adjourned. The Keldrith filed out, already discussing training schedules and facility requirements. Eddie sat alone at the conference table, staring at nothing. Vrkothar approached carefully. You could have said no. Could I, though? Eddie asked. They seemed pretty insistent. And honestly, Commander, I have learned something in my 47 days here. What is that? When warrior aliens want to learn from you, you teach them. Because the alternative is probably getting spaced out in airlock, and I am really not ready for that kind of commitment. Vrkothar almost smiled. You are adapting well to station life. I'm having a nervous breakdown in slow motion, Eddie corrected. But thank you for saying that. The first training session was scheduled for the next day. Word had spread, and when Vrkothar arrived to observe, he found not just the 12 guards from yesterday, but nearly 40 Keldrith warriors packed into Training Bay 7. Apparently, defeat at the hands of a human janitor was the hottest ticket on the station. Eddie stood in the center of the bay, still in his coveralls, holding his mop like it might protect him from what was about to happen. Okay, he said, his voice echoing in the large space. So, welcome to Mopping 101. I guess we will start with the basics. Does everyone have their equipment? The Keldrith looked at each other in confusion. Equipment? Cross asked. Yeah, you know, mops, buckets, cleaning solution. I requisitioned enough for everyone. Should have been delivered this morning. On cue, a service droid wheeled in a cart loaded with standard janitorial supplies. The Keldrith stared at the mops like they were alien artifacts. You want us to clean? Throk asked slowly. Well, yeah, Eddie said. You cannot learn to fight like a janitor without learning to be a janitor first. It is like building a foundation. You have to understand the basics before you can apply them to combat. Graxmar, who had insisted on attending the first session, nodded thoughtfully. This is wisdom. Many warriors forget that mastery begins with fundamentals. Sure, Eddie said, clearly just going with it. Fundamentals? That is exactly what I was thinking. So everyone grab a mop and a bucket. We're going to start with proper stance and grip. What followed was the most surreal hour of Rakthar's life, and he had once accidentally attended a Zentari poetry slam where the poems were performed in interpretive dance by sentient gas clouds. Eddie taught the Kaldrith guard how to mop. He demonstrated proper posture, explaining how keeping your back straight prevented injury during long shifts. He showed them the correct way to wring out a mop, the motion that had inadvertently flipped Throk yesterday. He walked them through efficient movement patterns, how to cover maximum floor space with minimum effort. And the Kaldrith, these warriors who had trained since birth in the deadliest combat techniques in the galaxy, practiced mopping with the intensity of religious converts. See, the key is in the core rotation, Eddie was saying, demonstrating a sweeping motion. You want to engage your whole body, not just your arms. Otherwise you will tire out quick, and then you will start cutting corners, and then the floor will not be properly clean. The guards mimicked his movements, their massive frames awkwardly wielding mops that seemed tiny in their hands. Some of them were getting it. Others looked like they were fighting the mops rather than using them. Throk, you are using too much force, Eddie called out. The mop is not your enemy. Work with it, not against it. There you go. Much better. Rakthar watched from the observation deck, Mora beside him. She had stopped changing colors, and settled on a sort of resigned beige. This is the strangest thing I have ever seen, Mora said. I once saw a quantum collective member try to exist in two places at once and accidentally create a small black hole. Vrakthar replied. This is definitely top 5 though. Do you think it will actually work? Teaching them to fight through cleaning? Honestly? Vrakthar watched as Eddie corrected a guard's footing, showing him how to pivot properly. I have no idea. But look at them. They are learning. They are engaged. Eddie might actually be onto something. Down in the training bay, Eddie had the guards practice their mopping in synchronized rows. It looked ridiculous. It looked absurd. It looked like the kind of thing that would end up as a viral video on the Galactic net, with a title like, "You will not believe what these elite warriors are doing." But there was something else too. As the guards moved together, their motions becoming more fluid, more natural, for Cap could see it. The efficiency Eddie had talked about. The economy of movement. These warriors were used to powerful, aggressive techniques. Eddie was teaching them something different. Something subtle. After an hour, Eddie called for a break. The guards were breathing hard, which shocked Frakathar. These were beings who could fight for days without rest. An hour of mopping had exhausted them. Good work, everyone, Eddie said. You are picking this up faster than I expected. Tomorrow we will work on the squeegee. That is where things get really interesting. One of the guards, a veteran named Vex, raised his hand. Instructor Eddie, may I ask a question? Sure, but you do not need to call me instructor. Just Eddie is fine. Eddie, Vex corrected. How does this translate to combat? I understand we are learning movement efficiency, but when do we apply this against an opponent? Eddie thought about it, scratching his chin. Well, I guess the same way I did yesterday. You see, when you are mopping, you are constantly aware of your environment, where the wet spots are, where people might walk, how to position yourself so you are not blocking anyone while still getting your work done. Combat is kind of the same thing, right? Awareness, positioning, efficiency, but combat involves strikes, blocks, grappling. Vex pressed. Sure, Eddie agreed, but all of that is just movement. And movement is movement. Whether you are swinging a mop or throwing a punch, the principles are the same. Balance, leverage, timing. He picked up his mop. Watch. When I mop, I am not thinking about each individual motion. I am thinking about the whole floor. The complete task. My body knows what to do because I have done it thousands of times. Muscle memory takes over, Eddie demonstrated, moving across the floor in smooth, flowing motions. Now yesterday, when Throk came at me, I was not thinking about fighting. I was thinking about getting out of the way. My body moved the same way it moves when I am navigating around obstacles at work. When he grabbed me, I responded the same way I respond when something is stuck to my mop. Twist, redirect, move on. The guards were watching intently now. You are saying, Cross spoke up, that by mastering these basic movements, By incorporating them into muscle memory, we can respond in combat without conscious thought. I mean, I guess. Eddie shrugged. I am not a philosopher or anything. I just know that when you do something enough times, your body remembers. And in a crisis, your body does what it knows best. Graxmar, who had been silent throughout the session, suddenly laughed. It was a deep, booming sound that rattled the bay's metal walls. Brilliant. This human is teaching us what our ancestors knew. The warriors who founded the Kaldrith Guard did not train with elaborate techniques. They trained with the tools of everyday life. Farming implements. Hunting equipment. They made their daily work their practice. Exactly, Eddie said. Then paused. Wait, is that what I am doing? You are returning us to our roots, Graxmar declared, stripping away centuries of accumulated complexity and revealing the pure foundation of combat. This is why you could defeat our guards. Not because you are stronger or faster, but because you have not forgotten the basics. Eddie looked genuinely uncomfortable with this interpretation. I really just clean floors, guys, and in doing so you have achieved mastery, Graxmar said. Rakthar's console beeped. He checked the message and felt his headache return with a vengeance. The station administrator wanted Eddie to give a demonstration for visiting dignitaries next week. The Kaldrith embassy was requesting that Eddie's training sessions be expanded, and someone had started a religion based on the philosophy of combative janitorial work. That last one was probably not official yet, but Rakthar had been in the galaxy long enough to see these things coming. Mora, he said tiredly. Update Eddie's file. Add combat instructor to his duties. And start drafting diplomatic briefings for every species that is going to want to study his techniques. How many species do you think that will be, sir? Rakathar watched as Eddie patiently showed a confused guard how to properly rinse a mop. All of them eventually. This is going to spread. By next month, every military academy in the galaxy is going to want to hire human janitors as tactical consultants. That is insane. That is the universe we live in now. Down in the training bay, Eddie had organized the guards into teams for what he called a cleaning relay race. They were mopping sections of floor in competition, and the warriors were taking it with deadly seriousness. Rakathar sighed. His peaceful assignment had become anything but. Eddie Martinez, the human janitor, had somehow managed to revolutionize galactic combat philosophy, armed with nothing but a mop and an earnest desire to keep floors clean. And the worst part, the absolutely infuriating part, was that it was working. The guards were moving better, responding faster, thinking more clearly. Eddie's ridiculous training was actually making them better warriors, which meant Rakthar was going to have to write a report explaining how mopping was now a valid combat training technique. He really should have taken that desk job on the homeworld. But as he watched Eddie laughing with the guards, encouraging them, treating these deadly warriors like regular people who just needed a little guidance, Rakathar had to admit something else. This strange, impossible human was making the station better. More connected, more unified. Warriors who had never socialized outside their units were bonding over proper floor care techniques. Different species were watching Eddie's training sessions and learning from them. One human janitor was somehow bringing the entire galactic peacekeeping station together. With a mop, Rakathar would never understand humans. But maybe, just maybe, he did not need to. Maybe he just needed to appreciate them for the chaos agents they were and try to minimize the property damage. Eddie caught his eye from the training floor and waved cheerfully. Rakathar waved back. It was going to be a very long assignment indeed. But perhaps, just perhaps, it might also be interesting.